The town of Willow Creek had a way of making its residents feel small, no matter how big their hearts were. Dusty streets wound between weathered wooden houses, and the wind often carried the scent of smoke from a dozen chimneys, mixing with the faint aroma of baked bread and livestock. Life here was simple, but it was also unkind to those who struggled to keep pace. For 9-year-old Lily, life had always been a daily battle, a struggle she shared with her mother, Maria, and her 8 siblings. Maria had been a widow for several years, left to care for a brood of children almost larger than many families in the town combined. People whispered as she walked by, murmuring about how a woman could manage, or rather, fail with so many mouths to feed. Their glances were not filled with empathy but judgment. It seemed that no one wanted to see Maria or her children succeed. To them, her family was simply a burden, a reflection of what society considered too much to handle. Every morning, Maria woke before dawn, rubbing sleep from her eyes while preparing a meager breakfast. Bread, sometimes stale, stretched over the table to feed all 9 children. She often skipped her own meal to make sure the little ones had at least a bite. Lily, though young, had learned early to shoulder responsibilities far beyond her age, fetching water from the town well, helping her younger siblings dress, and quietly tending to the smallest ones while Maria worked at the market or took on laundry jobs for neighbors. Life demanded constant effort, but the world offered only indifferent glances in return. The town market was a gauntlet of disapproval. Merchants would scowl as Maria attempted to sell her handmade bread or patchwork quilts. Buyers were few, and when they did appear, they haggled harshly, weighing each coin as if Maria's desperation made her worth less than the price of her goods. Sometimes, other mothers would tug their children away, muttering about the misfortune of such a large family, or whispering that children should be a blessing, not a burden. Lily heard it all, storing it away like tiny wounds that never quite healed. Even within their home, the weight of poverty pressed heavily on everyone. Rooms were cramped, shared among all 9 children, their beds little more than thin mattresses laid side by side on the wooden floor. Heat came sparingly from a small fireplace, and on winter nights, shivering bodies huddled together to survive. Yet despite the hardships, there was an unspoken bond of love that held them together. Lily admired her mother for her unyielding strength, her determination to keep the family afloat even when the world seemed to have turned its back. But even love had its limits when the world constantly reminded them of their inadequacy. Friends were scarce and kindness rarer still. Lily often stood by the wooden fence that separated their little yard from the town square, watching other children laugh and play with their families. The laughter felt like a distant melody, beautiful but unreachable. She wanted to tell someone that her mother was good, that they were good, but who would believe it? Who would look past the numbers 9 mouths, 9 pairs of shoes, 9 hungry hearts, and see the people behind them? As the sun climbed higher, casting a golden glow over Willow Creek, Lily felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the mixture of hope and fear that came from knowing the world did not care for her family. She whispered quietly to herself, "Nobody wants my mom. Nobody wants us." It was a statement, not a question. And yet, as hopeless as it sounded, it carried the raw honesty of a child who had learned early that words could not always change reality. This was their world, small, harsh, and unyielding. A world that had long since written them off. Little did Lily know, a chance encounter was about to turn her stark reality on its head, bringing a glimmer of hope into the life she had almost stopped dreaming for. Life for Maria and her 9 children was a relentless cycle of work and worry, each day blurring into the next. Dawn brought no relief, only another series of chores, errands, and attempts to stretch every coin as far as it could go. The family lived in a small, ramshackle house at the edge of Willow Creek, where the wind howled through the cracks in the wooden walls, carrying the cold straight into the rooms. The children had grown used to it, their bodies toughened by necessity. But Maria always worried they were missing out on the childhood that other families took for granted. Each morning, Maria divided herself into fragments, attending to her children while also finding work wherever it could be found. Some days she scrubbed laundry for the wealthier townsfolk, her hands raw and cracked from the cold water. Other days she sold loaves of bread or patchwork quilts in the market square, hoping that a handful of coins would suffice for food, firewood, and a few essentials. It was never enough. Lily often followed her mother to the market, carrying small baskets of goods and dodging the stares of people who looked at them not with sympathy, but with judgment. The children played their own part in survival, though often their efforts went unnoticed by outsiders. The older ones helped gather firewood, fetch water from the distant well, or tend to the few chickens and goats that gave them milk and eggs. The youngest, no more than 3 or 4, learned early to entertain themselves quietly, lest their cries disturb Maria while she worked. Lily, as the eldest daughter, bore the heaviest burden. She woke before sunrise to sweep the floor, light the fire, and wake the younger children. She patched clothes that were torn, mended shoes that were worn thin, and tried to keep the house in order despite the ever-present chill. Poverty was a constant companion. Meals were simple, often consisting of bread and thin soup, with vegetables scraped from the edges of markets or small gardens. On bad days, they went without entirely, learning to silence the rumble of their stomachs with distraction or quiet resignation. Yet Maria never let despair dominate her. She carried herself with quiet dignity, speaking to her children with warmth, even when exhaustion threatened to crush her spirit. The town's judgment hung over them like a heavy cloud. Merchants often looked the other way when Maria tried to sell her goods, while neighbors whispered about her reckless decision to have so many children. At school, Lily and her siblings faced ridicule. Other children would point, tease, or whisper cruel comments about their poverty. Lily learned to swallow her anger and sadness, knowing that fighting back would only make her feel smaller. Still, despite the endless struggle, there were moments of beauty hidden in their daily grind. The children laughed in the evenings, huddled together around the small fireplace, spinning stories and sharing dreams of brighter days. Lily loved to watch her mother smile when even the smallest triumph occurred, a coin earned, a loaf sold, a kind word from a stranger. These moments reminded them that life wasn't entirely cruel, that hope could exist even in hardship. But beneath the smiles, there was a quiet fear that never left Maria. Every cough, every injury, every missed payment was a reminder of how fragile their existence was. The children's needs were constant, and the world around them seemed to offer little more than judgment and struggle. Lily, in particular, felt this fear deeply, sensing that the life they had was not sustainable, that something or someone was needed to change their fate. It was in these small, often overlooked moments of toil and perseverance that the family's resilience shone brightest. Each day was a battle, but together they faced it. Lily often felt like she was living in 2 worlds at once. One was the harsh reality of Willow Creek, a place of judgment, poverty, and struggle. The other was a quiet, imagined world that existed only in her mind, a world where her family was safe, warm, and cherished, a world where her mother's laughter rang freely and her siblings' cries of hunger were replaced by giggles and joy. At 9 years old, Lily was old enough to understand the weight of responsibility, but young enough to cling to hope, fragile as it was. From the moment she awoke, Lily carried the burdens of her family in ways the adults around her often overlooked. She knew which siblings were hungry, which were cold, and which were too small or too tired to handle the daily chores. She had memorized the routines of survival, from fetching water from the well before the sun rose to ensuring the younger ones were dressed warmly before heading out to the market with her mother. Each task, though exhausting, gave her a sense of purpose. She felt indispensable, a small but crucial thread in the fabric that held her family together. Yet alongside her sense of responsibility was an acute awareness of how the outside world saw them. In school, other children whispered behind her back, "Look at Lily's family, so many kids, so poor." They laughed at her ragged clothes, her patched shoes, and the worn satchel she carried. Sometimes, Lily wondered why people could be so cruel. She knew her mother loved them, that they loved each other fiercely, but it seemed that love alone could not shield them from the world's disdain. The thought made her chest ache, a dull, persistent pain that never fully went away. Despite the hardships, Lily had a keen sense of observation and empathy. She noticed small things others ignored, the way her mother's hands trembled when she was exhausted, the quiet sigh of relief when one of the children successfully completed a chore, or the fleeting smile that appeared when a stranger offered an unexpected kindness. These observations gave Lily a perspective that was both tender and piercingly honest. She saw the struggle for what it was unforgiving, but she also saw beauty in the moments of perseverance and care. Lily also carried a secret sense of guilt. She often felt that because she was the eldest, she should do more, bear more, and somehow fix the impossible situation her family faced. She worried when she couldn't help enough, when her hands were too small to carry water for all her siblings, or when she couldn't gather enough firewood before the sun disappeared behind the hills. In her mind, every hardship that fell upon her family was partially her responsibility. This was a heavy burden for any child, but Lily bore it with quiet dignity. Her imagination became a refuge. At night, as her siblings slept, Lily would imagine a life where her family was safe, and valued a life where no one judged them for their poverty or large size. In these dreams, her mother smiled without worry, and her brothers and sisters laughed freely without fear. Lily clung to these imaginings because they reminded her that life could be different, that there might be a place where her family was not a burden but a blessing. It was during one of these quiet, reflective moments that Lily found herself speaking aloud, as if the walls could hear her plea. "Nobody wants my mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "because she has too many kids. Because we're too much." She did not ask a question. She simply stated what she saw as an unchangeable truth. It was her way of naming the pain that hung over their lives, acknowledging it so that perhaps in saying it, it might lose some of its power. Little did Lily know, her honesty, the raw, unfiltered truth she had carried like a hidden stone in her heart, would soon reach the ears of someone who saw not the burden, but the value. Someone who would see her family in a way the rest of the world never had. And in that moment, the first glimmer of hope began to flicker in the shadows of their harsh reality. The day the rancher arrived in Willow Creek, the town seemed to hold its breath. He was unlike anyone the townspeople had seen in years, tall, confident, and quietly commanding, yet with a warmth in his eyes that softened his presence. His horse, a strong chestnut stallion, moved with the ease of someone accustomed to wide-open spaces, not narrow streets and crowded markets. He dismounted with a practiced grace, and his boots, though dusty, hinted at wealth and careful taste. Whispers quickly spread through the market square. Some speculated he was a landowner looking to expand his holdings. Others murmured about a wealthy man seeking adventure or new investments. Few, however, noticed the weathered little family struggling in the corner of the market. Maria was at her usual spot, arranging the few quilts and loaves of bread she had managed to make that week. Her hands were raw, her back aching, and her eyes constantly scanning the street for opportunities or misfortune. She did not notice the rancher at first, nor did she expect anyone of importance to take interest in a family like hers. Willow Creek had taught her that people of wealth and status rarely lingered near the poor. They observed, judged, and moved on, leaving those who struggled to continue their fight alone. Lily, however, had noticed him immediately. She was crouched beside her youngest sibling, helping to tie a worn shoelace when the rancher's gaze fell upon her. There was an intensity in his look that made her straighten up, uncertain of why he was studying her so closely. Unlike the other adults in town, his eyes did not carry judgment or pity, they carried curiosity and understanding. It was the kind of look that made Lily want to shrink, but also made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced. The rancher walked deliberately through the market, pausing to observe the bustling stalls, greeting a few townspeople with polite nods and brief words. When he reached the corner where Maria and her children huddled, he stopped entirely. He crouched down to meet Lily's eye level, smiling gently, as if acknowledging her presence was the most natural thing in the world. Lily felt a mix of fear and hope. Most strangers either ignored her family or looked down upon them. This man, however, seemed to see through the dirt-streaked faces and patched clothes straight into the heart of the children standing there. "You've got quite a family," the rancher said, his voice calm but carrying a weight of sincerity that made Lily's heart skip. 9 children. That's a lot of work for one woman. His words were not cruel or judgmental, but observational, almost like a recognition of effort rather than a critique. Lily's mother stiffened slightly, wary as always. How often had strangers commented on her family with subtle disdain, never offering help, never offering understanding? Lily, in her innocence, spoke before her mother could caution her. "Nobody wants my mom," she said, her small voice firm and clear, "because she has too many kids. Nobody wants us." It was not a question, but a declaration, one that carried the weight of years of rejection and struggle. The rancher paused, listening carefully, his eyes never leaving the child's. There was a brief silence, but it was not uncomfortable. It was charged with something neither Lily nor her mother could yet name possibility. Then the rancher smiled, a slow, reassuring smile that seemed to break through the fog of hardship surrounding the family. "Good," he said simply, almost to himself, yet loud enough for Lily and Maria to hear. "I want all of you." The words felt impossible, almost magical. Maria's hands froze mid-motion, her mouth opening in surprise. Lily's eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and hope threatening to spill over. For the first time in years, someone was offering more than pity. Someone was offering acceptance, not just of the mother, but of all 9 children, with all their noise, needs, and challenges. It was the first spark of change in a life that had known little but struggle. The rancher had arrived not just as a stranger, but as the first glimmer of hope that the family might finally have a chance at a life where they were valued, protected, and cherished. Maria's heart pounded so fiercely she feared it might burst from her chest. She stared at the rancher, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or faint. His words, "I want all of you," reverberated in her mind, impossible and yet dazzlingly real. For years she had struggled alone, carrying 9 children on her back while the world turned away. And now here was a man, a stranger, offering them not just help, but a place where they would be wanted. Lily clutched her mother's hand tightly, sensing the gravity of the moment. Her wide eyes searched the rancher's face, looking for some sign that he was joking, or testing them, or maybe even hiding some cruel intention, but there was none. His expression was steady, honest, and filled with something rare, genuine kindness. I don't understand," Maria said, her voice trembling. Why would you want a family like ours? We're a lot to handle. 9 children, we have nothing to offer except work chores. A roof to keep dry." Her words spilled out in a rush, the fear and disbelief mingling together. She had expected pity, perhaps a handout, but never this. Never a proposal that seemed to accept them completely as they were. The rancher smiled, his gaze soft but unwavering. "I don't see too many or nothing to offer," he said calmly. "I see a family. I see resilience. I see hearts willing to work, to care, and to love. And I don't want just one of you. I want all of you. Your mother, every child. You belong together, and I can help make that easier." Maria blinked, fighting back tears. Her mind raced. Could this be real? Could a stranger truly care enough to offer safety, stability, and even opportunity to a family that had been cast aside by nearly everyone else? She glanced at Lily, who nodded ever so slightly, as if urging her mother to trust, to believe that hope was possible. Even the children, scattered behind Maria, looked up with curiosity and tentative excitement. They had grown used to rejection and disappointment. Their world had taught them that no one wanted them. Yet now, a stranger stood before them, valuing them not for what they could do, but simply for who they were. The rancher continued, sensing their hesitation. "I know it's a lot to ask," he said. "Change is scary, but I promise, I don't expect you to be perfect. I just want to give you a chance to live without fear, to grow, and to thrive. If you say yes, you won't be alone. You'll have a home, work that matters, and someone who believes in all of you." Maria felt a lump in her throat. Every instinct screamed caution. After years of disappointment, it was difficult to believe in genuine kindness, especially from a stranger. But there was something in the rancher's demeanor that calmed her fears. Something that made her feel that this wasn't charity, it was opportunity, respect, and acceptance wrapped into one. Lily, unable to contain herself, whispered, "Mom, maybe this is real. Maybe. Maybe he really wants us." Her small voice carried the quiet hope of a child who had almost stopped dreaming, a hope so fragile it could shatter with one wrong word. Maria took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over her children, each face marked by hunger, fatigue, and resilience. She realized that she had a choice: continue struggling alone in a world that offered nothing, or take a leap of faith with this man who had seen their worth when no one else had. Slowly, she nodded, a mixture of fear and courage tightening in her chest. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but certain. We'll come with you." The rancher's smile widened, warm and reassuring, as he extended his hand to each child and then to Maria. It was not a handout. It was an invitation, a promise that they would be safe and valued together. And in that moment, the little family realized that their long struggle was about to take a turn toward hope, acceptance, and a new beginning they had never dared to imagine. Even as Maria agreed to go with the rancher, a tight knot of doubt clung to her heart. The words, "I want all of you," still echoed in her mind, but she could not ignore the years of hardship and betrayal that had shaped her. People had promised help before, only to abandon them when it was inconvenient. Could this be any different? Could a stranger truly accept a mother and her 9 children with all their noise, mess, and relentless needs? Lily, sensing her mother's unease, tried to offer reassurance. "Mom," she whispered softly, "he looks different. He doesn't seem like the others." "I think he really means it." But even her small voice could not fully dispel the shadow of worry in Maria's mind. It was one thing to hear comforting words. It was another to believe in them after a lifetime of struggle. That evening, as the family gathered in their cramped, drafty home, Maria sat with her children in a circle, hands intertwined, trying to calm the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. "I don't know what to expect," she admitted, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "This rancher, he might be kind, or he might be, well, anything. But we have a choice. We can stay here and keep struggling, or we can take a chance." Her words hung in the air. The children, though weary from long days of work and worry, felt the gravity of the moment. Each one realized that this decision could change the course of their lives entirely. Some faces reflected hope, others uncertainty, but all were attentive, listening to their mother weigh the impossible decision. Lily felt a surge of determination. "Mom," she said, "we've been strong all this time. We can be strong there too. We can help each other. We have to believe that it could be good." Her voice, small but resolute, carried the wisdom of a child who had learned to shoulder responsibilities far beyond her years. It was as if she were reminding her mother that they were not alone. Together, they could face whatever came next. The night was long, filled with whispered questions and hesitant speculation. Maria worried about practicalities, the work on a ranch, the adjustment to a new home, whether her children could adapt to new routines. She worried about herself, about her ability to lead them through yet another change. The world had taught her to be wary, to expect disappointment, and the old fears were not easily shaken. Yet beneath the worry, a small ember of hope glimmered. The rancher's words had been clear, sincere, and unwavering. He had not offered charity but acceptance, a chance to thrive, and most importantly, a place where the family could be together without judgment. That possibility was intoxicating in its rarity, and Maria clung to it with a cautious optimism she had not allowed herself in years. By dawn, the decision began to take root. Maria stood at the window, watching the first light creep over the rooftops of Willow Creek. Her children slept quietly, their small chests rising and falling, unaware of the magnitude of the change about to sweep through their lives. She realized that clinging to fear would only prolong their suffering. Perhaps this rancher's offer was more than it seemed. Perhaps it was the lifeline they had been waiting for all along. Finally, with a deep breath and a sense of resolve, Maria made her choice. She would trust the rancher, not blindly, but with careful hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was filled with potential, rather than judgment or despair. She gathered her children, each one rubbing sleep from their eyes, and prepared them for a journey that would forever alter the course of their lives. And so, with hearts heavy with anticipation but buoyed by hope, the family stepped toward a future that promised not only survival, but belonging, acceptance, and the first real chance at happiness they had ever known. The first sight of the ranch left the children breathless. Rolling green fields stretched farther than their eyes could see, dotted with grazing cattle, sturdy barns, and a large house perched on a hill. The air was cleaner, fresher, and carried the scent of grass and earth rather than smoke and dust. For Lily and her siblings, who had spent their lives navigating the cramped streets and alleys of Willow Creek, the ranch felt like stepping into another world. A world so vast and open it seemed almost magical. Yet the magic did not erase the challenges. Adjusting to ranch life was harder than the family had anticipated. Tasks were unfamiliar, equipment intimidating, and the sheer scale of the property overwhelming. Lily struggled to carry water for the animals, her arms burning with effort, while her younger siblings stumbled over uneven terrain or squealed in fright at the sight of a large cow or horse. Maria, too, found herself exhausted from constant work, though this time it was not just about survival but learning the rhythms and responsibilities of running a proper ranch. The rancher was patient, guiding them with quiet authority. He taught the children how to feed the livestock, mend fences, and tend the fields. He showed Maria how to manage the day-to-day operations of the property while ensuring the household ran smoothly. His teaching was gentle but firm, always encouraging them to do their best without making them feel inadequate for the mistakes they inevitably made. "Every effort counts," he would say, "and no one here is unworthy of learning." Even as they struggled with the physical labor, small victories brought sparks of pride. Lily managed to herd a group of sheep without losing a single one. One of the younger children learned to milk a goat successfully for the first time. Maria discovered that her skills in cooking and mending clothes were highly valued, not just tolerated as they had been in town. With each accomplishment, the children felt more confident, their spirits lifting in ways they had never experienced. But ranch life was not without its emotional adjustments. The children missed their old home, even with its hardships, because it had been familiar. Nights were especially hard, sleeping in beds larger and softer than they were used to felt strange, and the quiet of the open field sometimes made them feel lonely. Lily, who had been the protector and guide in their small home, now found herself learning to share responsibility and trust in others, including the rancher, who insisted on involving them in decisions and valuing their input. Maria also faced internal challenges. Though grateful for the rancher's generosity, she struggled to fully let go of her fears. Could she trust this life? Could her children adapt to this new routine? Was it truly possible for them to belong somewhere without judgment? Each day brought a mix of relief and anxiety, small moments of joy tempered by lingering worry. Yet slowly, bonds began to form. The children began to see the ranch not as a strange, overwhelming place, but as a home where they were safe and needed. Maria's respect for the rancher grew as she realized his dedication went beyond simple charity. He genuinely cared for their well-being. Lily, especially, felt a sense of awe and gratitude. For the first time in her life, she was not just a helper or a burden. She was part of a family that had purpose and direction, and she had a role to play in shaping it. By the end of their first week, exhaustion was paired with accomplishment. Mud-streaked clothes and sore muscles were badges of a life that, though difficult, was real and meaningful. The rancher watched them with quiet satisfaction, knowing that their resilience and willingness to learn would help them thrive. Slowly but surely, the children began to see the ranch not just as a vast property, but as a place where they belonged, where they could grow, and where their lives once burdened by survival alone could begin to flourish. As the days turned into weeks, the ranch slowly transformed from a vast, unfamiliar space into a home for Maria and her children. With each passing day, the bonds between the family and the rancher grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. What had begun as cautious cooperation now flourished into genuine connection, and the children began to see him not just as a benefactor, but as a figure of guidance and care in their lives. The rancher had a way of noticing small details that mattered. He complimented the children on their efforts, acknowledging even the tiniest successes, from Lily as careful tending of the sheep to the youngest child learning to feed the chickens without spilling the grain. "Well done," he would say with a smile, and in those moments, the children felt seen, truly seen, in a way they had never experienced in Willow Creek. Each word of encouragement became a building block, fostering self-confidence and pride. Maria, too, found herself opening up in ways she had not expected. The rancher's presence did not diminish her authority or undermine her role as mother. Instead, he respected her, offered guidance without judgment, and supported her decisions. They shared long conversations about managing the household, caring for the children, and maintaining the ranch. Slowly, Maria realized that trust was not just possible, it was deserved. She could rely on him without fear, and in doing so, she began to heal from years of isolation and burden. The children began to form unique relationships with the rancher as well. Lily gravitated toward him for advice and encouragement, learning not just the practical skills of ranch life, but also the subtle lessons of patience, perseverance, and responsibility. One of her older brothers found in him a mentor for working with the animals, while another discovered a confidant who listened to his hopes and frustrations without criticism. Even the youngest children, shy and timid at first, began to respond to his gentle guidance, learning to navigate the vastness of the ranch with courage and curiosity. Family meals became moments of joy and laughter. The table, once a place of scarcity and quiet tension, now overflowed with stories and chatter. The rancher joined them, not as an overseer but as a participant in their daily life. He listened to their stories, asked questions about their past, and celebrated small victories with genuine warmth. These shared experiences strengthened the family's sense of belonging and reinforced the idea that they were valued for who they were, not merely for what they could contribute. Even the quiet moments contributed to bonding. Early mornings spent tending animals together, evenings walking the sprawling fields, and nights by the fire sharing stories all became rituals that tied the family to the rancher and to each other in new ways. The children began to see that life did not have to be a constant struggle for survival. It could also be filled with care, guidance, and love. But the most profound change occurred in Lily's heart. She had carried the weight of responsibility for so long that it sometimes felt unbearable. Now, with the rancher's support and her mother's renewed confidence, she began to understand that leadership could be shared, that asking for help did not mean weakness, and that love could be both a bond and a safety net. She laughed more freely, dreamed bigger, and allowed herself to imagine a future where her family's worth was recognized and not questioned. In these weeks of adjustment and learning, the rancher became more than just a figure of authority. He became a part of their family. He offered guidance, kindness, and understanding, and in return, he earned their trust, respect, and affection. The seeds of hope planted during those early days on the ranch were now taking root, blossoming into something beautiful, a family united not just by circumstance, but by choice, care, and love. Even as Maria and her children settled into ranch life, the world beyond their property remained skeptical. News of the rancher taking in a widow with 9 children spread quickly through Willow Creek, and not all the attention was kind. Some townspeople whispered that the family was being spoiled or that the rancher must have ulterior motives. Others doubted that the children could adapt to their new responsibilities, believing them incapable of meaningful contribution. Yet none of these doubts mattered as much as the ones that lingered in Maria's own heart, the fear that despite their best efforts, the world might still reject them. The first real test came when a visiting neighbor arrived at the ranch, his eyes wide with disbelief as he surveyed the bustling family. "I don't know why you took them in," he said, shaking his head. "A widow with 9 children? That's more trouble than it's worth. Are you sure this is a good idea?" The rancher smiled calmly, undeterred by the criticism. "They are capable," he replied simply. "Each one of them brings something valuable, and together, they are stronger than you might think." Maria's initial instinct was to shrink back, afraid the neighbor's words might be true. But Lily tugged gently at her mother's sleeve, whispering, "Mom, we can do this. We've already come this far." The quiet encouragement reminded Maria of the resilience they had carried for years. She realized that their success depended not on the approval of others, but on the strength and unity of their own family. Over the following weeks, the family faced several practical challenges that tested both their skills and their confidence. A sudden storm threatened the livestock, forcing the children to work through heavy rain and mud to secure the animals. Fences needed repair after high winds, and early harvests demanded long, exhausting days. Each task, though physically demanding, became a proving ground. Slowly, the townspeople who had doubted them began to take notice, not through gossip, but by witnessing the family's competence, determination, and teamwork. Lily's leadership became evident during these trials. She organized her younger siblings, delegating tasks according to each child's strengths, and ensured that everyone had a role to play. Her mother, too, grew more confident, realizing that her children could handle responsibility and that they were thriving under guidance rather than judgment. The ranchers' trust in them only strengthened their resolve, showing them that when someone believes in your potential, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome. One day, a neighbor who had previously doubted the family's abilities visited again. This time, he found the children efficiently tending the animals, Maria managing the household with calm authority, and the rancher observing proudly from the porch. The man's skepticism faltered, replaced by grudging admiration. I didn't think they'd manage," he admitted. "But you've all proven me wrong." It was not just outsiders who began to see their worth. It was also within themselves that the greatest transformation occurred. The family learned to trust their abilities, support one another, and face challenges without fear. What had once seemed impossible, a widow with 9 children living successfully on a large ranch, became their daily reality. Each accomplishment, each problem solved, reinforced their belief in themselves and in the possibility of a life free from judgment. Through adversity and doubt, the family discovered their inner strength. They realized that while the world might question their worth, the bond between them, coupled with the rancher's guidance and faith, was unbreakable. They had transformed from a family overlooked and dismissed into a unit capable of resilience, courage, and triumph, ready to embrace a future that had once seemed beyond their reach. By the time spring had fully arrived, the ranch had transformed into more than just a workplace for Maria and her children. It had become their home in the truest sense. The once overwhelming expanse of green fields and barns now felt familiar, comforting, and alive with possibility. Every corner carried memories of lessons learned, challenges overcome, and small victories celebrated. The family, once weighed down by poverty and rejection, now moved through the ranch with confidence, pride, and a sense of belonging that had long eluded them. The children thrived under the rhythm and structure of ranch life. Lily had blossomed into a capable young leader, her natural empathy and resourcefulness guiding her siblings and earning the rancher's quiet admiration. Each child had found a niche, some tending animals, some helping in the kitchen, others managing crops and supplies. The rancher encouraged them all, celebrating their successes and patiently guiding them through mistakes. Slowly, the children began to understand that work was not a burden but a source of pride, a way to contribute meaningfully to the life they were now building together. Maria's transformation was equally profound. No longer the weary, overburdened mother struggling for survival, she had regained a sense of purpose and self-worth. She reveled in the rhythm of ranch life, in the laughter of her children, and in the knowledge that they were all safe, valued, and thriving. The rancher's steady presence allowed her to feel supported rather than alone, and she discovered the rare joy of trusting another adult to share the weight of responsibility without judgment. Evenings became moments of reflection and gratitude. The family would gather by the fire, tired but happy, sharing stories and recounting the day's triumphs. Laughter rang through the rooms where once there had only been quiet anxiety and whispered fears. Lily often looked around at her siblings and mother, feeling a deep sense of pride and relief. They had endured hardship, yet they had arrived at a place where love and stability were no longer luxuries, but constants. The rancher, for his part, found fulfillment in their growth. He had not taken in the family out of charity or pity, but out of recognition of their inherent worth. Watching them adapt, learn, and flourish brought him a quiet satisfaction and joy he had rarely experienced. Their resilience, determination, and kindness had enriched the ranch, just as he had enriched their lives. They were not merely beneficiaries of his generosity, they were a family in every sense, bound by trust, care, and shared experience. The world outside Willow Creek remained, but the family no longer measured their worth by its judgment. They had discovered that home was not merely a place, but a sense of security, belonging, and love. The ranch became a sanctuary where mistakes were forgiven, effort was celebrated, and every member's contribution was valued. The children, once overlooked and dismissed, now carried themselves with confidence and pride. Maria, once burdened by fear and doubt, now walked with dignity, secure in the knowledge that her family was safe and cherished. On a quiet afternoon, Lily stood at the edge of the pasture, watching her siblings play with the younger children and her mother tending the garden. She turned to the rancher, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered softly, "for seeing us when nobody else did." The rancher smiled, a warmth in his eyes that mirrored the joy in Lily's heart. "No," he said gently, "it's you who made this possible. You, your mother, your siblings, you brought life to this place just as much as I could offer. Together we built something lasting." In that moment, Lily understood fully what had changed. They were no longer a family defined by hardship, poverty, or rejection. They were a family defined by love, resilience, and the power of believing in one another. The ranch, once intimidating and unknown, had become a home filled with hope, laughter, and possibility. And as the sun set over the rolling hills, casting a golden glow across the fields, the family stood together, a united and cherished unit. The journey that had begun with struggle, fear, and uncertainty had culminated in a life full of promise, a life where every child, every mother, and every heartbeat was valued, seen, and loved. The little girl's whispered words, "Nobody wanted my mom," had been answered in the most profound way possible. Not only had someone wanted them all, but they had found a place where they truly belonged. A new beginning, rich with hope and love, had finally arrived.